know he's the shove it
man! Alright, shove it squad, it's the gut punching, girl taking, never shaking, HAWK all night all day. And today we're doing something a bit different for today's episode of Ring of the Hawk. Because today, in a first ever, a wrestler will have two separate shots in one video. Yes, you heard me right, it's a 1-2 punch to the gut special. And of course,
if you know a wrestler that can do the J-O-B to the H-A-W-K any night, any day, shove their name in the comments, Jack.
okay, it's Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Jim Ross thought he'd be worth millions. There's a lot to talk about in this video, but mainly I just want to try and understand why Jim Ross was so obsessed with Steve Williams. Because from the little I saw of him in the WWF, which admittedly wasn't much, I never understood the hype of this guy. Dr. Death was in the NWA in Japan and then WCW in the early 90s, where he's more of a tag team wrestler, but he was successful. That itself would qualify for a separate Ring of the Hawk video. After that run, it was back to Japan again. Things got really weird though in 1998. In the middle of the Attitude Era, a time named for crazy over-the-top promos and characters, but not so much wrestling, Jim Ross pushed to bring Steve Williams into the company, and he was supposed to get a main event push and feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. But it doesn't start well. Match 1, Brawl for All first round. Pierre Carolette versus Dr. Death Steve Williams. The audience don't really react to him because they don't know who he is. He looks old, kind of grisly and flabby, but at the same time intimidating. Steve Williams takes him down almost straight away for 5 points. Pierre is just too slow and he can't connect with his punches. Doc keeps coming at him as Pierre dumps in his nappy and desperately tries to run away. Doc takes him down again for another 5. Williams seems so calm and composed as he analyses his opponent. Williams attempts a third takedown, which Pierre manages to reverse for 5 points of his own. That ends the first round. In the second round, Steve Williams keeps encouraging Pierre to throw punches at him so he can just get a bit nearer to him. Pierre looks tired and Williams is just waiting for his moment. Williams lands a punch to the back of the head which knocks away Pierre's mouthpiece. That ends the second round. In the third round, both guys desperately throw punches. Pierre still hangs in there though for a few more seconds. But then he stays in the corner and the ref just says that he's done, and that ends the match. I think Pierre was just fatigued. An actual good match as far as Brawl for All matches go, as there was a lot of punches thrown and not so many boring takedowns. Williams looked quite intimidating for his debut, but at the same time, he didn't exactly steamroll PCO, who wasn't exactly a main event star at this point. He stayed on his feet until the end. So what does that say about Dr. Death Steve Williams? If he hadn't debuted in a real fight, I'm sure he would have been booked to annihilate his opponent. They wouldn't have booked PCO to still be on his feet at the end of a real match. It's a C, an interesting debut. Match 2, Brawl for All second round. Dr. Death Steve Williams, who's being pushed as the toughest man in this sport, versus Bart Gunn. And you all know where this one's going. Just like the last round, Dr. Death manages a takedown straight away. Punches are quickly traded, except this time it's looking like Bart Gunn is the one who has the stamina advantage and Williams is the one who looks tired. The second round is really just Steve Williams on offense, with Bart Gunn waiting for his time. He eventually finds it and takes Williams down on the ropes. It was the only thing that happened in this round and the crowd sound bored. The third and final round starts with boring chants. A very clean looking takedown from Bart Gunn, which actually injures Dr. Death's leg. Punches are frantically thrown now. Bart Gunn lands an uppercut and then the most famous punch, which knocks out Steve Williams. As he lies down on the mat, he realises that his career is pretty much over. Jim Ross dumps in his nappy on commentary of anger. His guy has lost. He tries to make his excuses for Dr. Death, but it's too late. As far as character work goes, there's none of it. He just looks miserable. Oh, and that leg injury is legit, and it keeps him out of the ring for several months. Let's give it an S. There was nothing positive to come out of this match. Moving on quickly. Steve Williams returns to the WWF in February 1999. He interferes as a masked ninja during a hardcore match, and he throws Bart Gunn off the entrance ramp through a table. The following week, Jim Ross returns to Raw after suffering a bout of Bell's palsy. Looking at him here, I never quite realised how much he suffered. His face has recovered so much. He interviews Bart Gunn about the Brawl for All, but Jim Ross is being a dick. His condition is turned into an angle as Ross moans about how much he suffered and how pissed off he is that his boy Dr. Death got knocked out. Ross slaps Bart Gunn before Dr. Death attacks Bart Gunn from behind with a German suplex. Jim Ross instructs the attack to continue, so now I guess Dr. Death is being managed by the heel Jim Ross. But unfortunately, Dr. Death was just shoved on Heat, the C-show. The angle became more about Jim Ross than Dr. Death. Tiger Ali Singh didn't have anything better to do, so he cut a promo about Jim Ross having Bell's palsy. He said it was very entertaining seeing his half face. He offered the crowd a cash reward if someone could come up and do a Jim Ross impression. Eventually they find Ed Ferrara in the crowd. I'm sure most of you know, but he's one of the writers for real at this point. He proceeds to do a Jim Ross impression whilst crushing half of his face. The crowd boo. Little does he know, but Ross and Dr. Death have sneaked up. Dr. Death hits a German suplex and a set-out powerbomb on Tiger Ali. Shane McMahon on commentary says that Jim Ross needs to get a sense of humour. It's crazy how everyone dumps on WCW for the Jim Ross impersonations, but WWF did it too. Not a narrative you normally hear. You haven't seen the last of the Jim Ross impersonations on this video. Jim Ross keeps ranting on the microphone without Dr. Death getting to say a word. The Big Show stamps out and they both dump in their nappies with fear and run away. Wow, and people wonder why Dr. Death wasn't popular in the WWF. He squashed the Hardy Boys in a handicap match on Heat, and that's pretty much it for his appearances. Match 3, Raw, WWF Hardcore title match. Dr. Death, Steve Williams with Jim Ross challenges for the belt that belongs to Hardcore Holly. Two really likeable guys in this match, I guess. Williams is on him straight away with smacks in the corner, but then he runs into a clothesline from Holly. Bit of a clunky reversal now as Williams does a sort of hip toss slam. It's pretty slow as Dr. Death slowly works Holly over. He smashes Hardcore's leg into the post. Oh yeah, that reminds me, this is supposed to be a hardcore match. Dr. Death has a really interesting physique. He looks strong as an ox and he looks like one too. Death drops Holly on his leg, but the camera keeps cutting away and missing moves because JR is ranting about how great Dr. Death is. Hardcore Holly remembers that it's a hardcore match and he fetches a table. This is a bad decision because Williams gives him a reverse atomic drop. He starts stamping his feet like a bull. He picks Hardcore Holly up, but the ref is knocks out at the same time. This is a ref bump. Oklahoma stampede through the table. What a move, but no ref. Al Snow rushes the ring and he hits Dr. Death with a frying pan. The ref wakes up to count the 3. Jim Ross dumps in his nappy of anger that his boy was screwed. One frying pan shot. Not a good hardcore match at all. Really cool finisher though, it looked devastating. I'm giving this one a D for a cool finisher, but there really wasn't anything here. It would be an S if it wasn't my first time seeing the Oklahoma Stampede. Dr. Death got his revenge the next week on Raw when he attacked both Al Snow and Holly after they had a match. He would only have one final televised match on WWF, it's a C-show match on Metal. And as it's a C-show, we can't include it for grading due to the established Ring of the Hawk rules. But this one's coming at you from April 99. And I can also tell you, this is his best WWF match. Tiger Ali Singh takes on Dr. Death Steve Williams, and Williams is now babyface, along with Jim Ross. We get a bunch of slams and suplexes and it has more time dedicated to it than any of the other matches, and Dr. Death wins it. What's interesting is on commentary they keep talking about an upcoming hardcore title match that Dr. Death is getting at Backlash. Unfortunately we would never get that match because Dr. Death was released from the WWF just after this. He was injured yet again. He came into the WWF with big expectations, didn't come close to reaching any of them. He was doing the same thing he'd been doing in the 80s and in Japan, but the Attitude Era was a different kettle of fish. People were watching the show for entertainment, not to watch a middle-aged man silently throw people with suplexes and not a lot else. I mean, Jim Ross was his entire personality. This guy in the main event I'm sure wouldn't have worked. Or would it? Because Dr. Death Steve Williams was not yet finished with wrestling in the US. We still have to check out his time in WCW to see if he proved me wrong. As I said earlier, first time ever, all in the same video, because these two companies' spells were very similar and close in time. Towards the end of 99, Dr. Death had recovered enough to get back in the ring and he was back on TV by November. And he has a new manager, which is Ed Ferrara, who's jumped over from the WWF. And he's still doing his Jim Ross gimmick, but now he's called Oklahoma. This was a gimmick that offended internet fans far and wide. The main problem wasn't that he was doing a Jim Ross gimmick, it was that he was screwing up his face and pretending that he had Bell's palsy. But that isn't Dr. Death's fault, so moving on. What I will say is, you can't dump on WCW too much because Ed Ferrara literally did this in WWF too. To someone who's uneducated and a bit daft, they'd probably think it's fine to do because they did it once before, without repercussions. Anyway, Dr. Death starts a feud with Vampiro's Misfits in action for absolutely no reason. Vampiro just stands around watching Dr. Death like a moron, but eventually he kicks him, which leads to our first WCW match. Dr. Death's in way better shape than his WWF days. He almost looked fat in that company. Match 4, Nitro Cage match. Jerry Only with the Misfits in action and Vampiro. They basically look like the biggest bunch of goons you've ever seen. He'll take on Dr. Death with Oklahoma. Everything looks exactly the same as his time in the WWF. Oh, I can't stand Oklahoma screwing up his face. He isn't half-assing that thing at all, is he? He's going full pelt. Dr. Death seems like he's struggling to even get into the cage. He makes it eventually and rushes straight at Jerry Only. They're both clunking and jumping around the ring. Jerry Only jumps into his arms to get a power slam. No pin is made. Jerry Only climbs to the top rope and hits a crossbody. Again, no cover is made. Dr. Death no-sells some punches and squashes Jerry in the corner. Now he's screaming, "This one's for you, Oklahoma." He weakly pulls Jerry Only off the ropes out of the corner, but he only gets a bit of height on it. Just as Dr. Death manages a back suplex, the Misfits in action attack Oklahoma, who's on commentary. They cover him in barbecue sauce. Dr. Death hits the Oklahoma Stampede, but there's no ref. In fact, there never was. He looks confused for a while, and he's probably thinking, I can't climb this cage with my bad leg. He whips Jerry Only into the corner and he just sort of falls out the cage door. Dr. Death Steve Williams has lost to Jerry Only. What a 2-minute cage match that was. Absolutely appalling. You can tell that Dr. Death was trying his hardest to have a wrestling match, but there was just so much chaos going on in 2 minutes. I'm giving his WCW debut a D. At least he had a range of moves, but this thing was booked like a complete state. And now he's lost to someone I've never even heard of before. Match 5, Thunder, 3-on-1 handicap match. Dr. Death Steve Williams of Oklahoma versus Silver King and the Villanos. Williams stands his ground with a clothesline. Oklahoma is no longer pretending he has Bell's palsy, and he says he was cured when he had barbecue sauce spilt on him last week. Silver King hits a top rope missile dropkick and Williams is down for a bit. The Luchadors desperately try to keep him on the mat, but Williams starts hawking up. He picks up and press slams Silver King as the other Luchadors watch on. Williams takes them out of a double clothesline. Vampiro is now here and he throws Oklahoma to the mat. Back in the ring, Dr. Death with a back suplex. Once again, all the moves are being missed by wackiness around the ringside. We come back just in time to catch the Oklahoma Stampede for the 3. What the hell am I supposed to grade this rubbish? It's an S because I was barely able to see the match. Match 6, Nitro Tag Match. Oklahoma teams up with Dr. Death Steve Williams to take on Vampiro and Jerry Only. What kind of a name is Jerry Only anyway? Someone give this guy a stupid name fee. Oklahoma is wrestling with a headset on, and you can get a live feed of his commentary. This is certainly different. Some say this inspired Booker T for TNA. Oklahoma immediately tags out. Vampiro keeps dodging Dr. Death until he's turned inside out of a clothesline. Couple of big shoulder tackles from Dr. Death. New move from Dr. Death now is putting on the spinning toe hold. Unfortunately, Oklahoma begs for the tag and he also does the spinning toe hold whilst Dr. Death gives him instructions. Oklahoma pretty soon gets caught with a big boot and he has to tag out. Dr. Death starts hawking up. Jerry Only tries a sunset flip which doesn't work. He's shoved into the corner and then hit with a gorilla press slam. Nice. Vampiro gets the tag and he hits a middle rope dropkick whilst Dr. Death is distracted hawking up. Oklahoma takes Jerry Only out of a chair on the outside. Dr. Death Steve Williams comes out the corner with another shoulder knockdown. Vampiro throws a spinning round kick which is ducked by Dr. Death and turned into a power slam. He wants to pick Vampiro up for the pin to show his dominance, but Vamp kicks out anyway. Dr. Death misses his attack in the corner and he catches a Vampiro kick. Vampiro now looks to dive, but he's stopped by Oklahoma with a boot. Couple of short arm clotheslines straight into the back suplex. Annoyingly, he tags in Oklahoma again. He dives off the first rope with an elbow drop, and that is the 3. Why the hell does it feel like everything Dr. Death does in both WWF and WCW is just designed to give other people airtime? It's a sort of entertaining match, but these matches are also hard to judge because everything around him is so crazy and nothing's about him. I do like his hawking up thing admittedly, and the crowd do too. It's a C, I don't know. Match 7, Nitro, Suplex versus Powerbomb match. Dr. Death Steve Williams of Oklahoma versus Sid Vicious with Seth. Sid Vicious is apparently his idol. Sid is checking on his friend when Steve Williams dives off the apron with an axe handle. Quickly in the ring, Steve Williams hits some strikes with Vicious no-selling. The shoulder thrusts in the corner do take Sid down, briefly. Dr. Death tries his suplex, which Sid blocks. He can't manage a scoop slam either. So if we can't see suplexes, I take it this is just going to be a bunch of punches. Oh no, I'm wrong. He cheats and hits Sid Vicious with a boot. This boot has somehow knocked Sid Vicious out. Vampiro is here now chasing after Oklahoma, but he runs straight into a clothesline from Steve Williams. Sid wakes back up and kicks him in the gut and tries the powerbomb, which is reversed. He immediately just does it again and this time it works. Wow, that was a pointless, horrible match. It's an S. Sid does chokeslam Oklahoma, which does make it a bit better, but we're not here to grade Sid. Match 8, Thunder, Dr. Death with Oklahoma versus the Wall brother, who's with Berlin. These two guys look miserable. These two big bastards smash into each other time and time again, but neither can knock the other down. The Doc throws some punches and nails a delayed scoop slam. The Wall manages a fight back in the corner. He runs at Dr. Death with a big boot. He sends Dr. Death running now and boots him again. No covers are made and the Wall slowly chops Dr. Death in the corner. Steve Williams misses his splash in the corner and these two guys are moving in slow motion here. Berlin is now holding out a cane and threatening Oklahoma. Dr. Death is looking for a slam, but he can't do it because Berlin hits him in the back of the head with a shoe. The match is thrown out for DQ. I just don't know what to do. I think I might quit YouTube. After the match, Dr. Death clotheslines the wall out of the ring and celebrates like it's going well, but it's not. It's not going well at all. It's an S. Before the next match, we get an excellent promo from Steve Williams of him screaming "Boomer Sooner" in the locker room. Fantastic stuff. Match 9, final match, WCW Starrcade 99. Congratulations for making it onto pay-per-view, Steve Williams. Feels like that's a big deal whenever that happens on Ring of the Hawk. It's Vampiro with Oklahoma. He's been locked in a shark cage by the Misfits in action. He still has his headset though. It's nice of the event staff to help the Misfits carry the cage. After a very long build-up, Dr. Death Steve Williams finally jogs out. He doesn't have his little robe anymore. Vampiro straight away dives off the cage on top of Steve Williams. He sends him into the crowd barrier, which doesn't work, and Dr. Death weakly reverses the next move with a backdrop. Vamp no-sells it and kicks him. In the ring for the first time, Vampiro has some simple offense in the corner, which isn't doing too much. Doc starts a combat with a wicked knife-edge chop. They have a battle to see who can chop the hardest. I miss his hawking up thing, he hasn't done that for a while. The big shoulder block finally gets Dr. Death some breathing space, and he uses that space to hit football tackles. The Misfits are shaking the cage, like we need to see that. Dr. Death misses his corner splash and gets back suplex for a 2. Vamp thinks he can end it with a dive, and Dr. Death meets him on the ropes. He rakes Vampiro's eyelids and hits a massive overhead suplex. By far the craziest move of this run. The jobbers and actions start rushing the ring, and Doc is able to easily deal with them. Unfortunately, this all distracts Dr. Death a bit too much, and Vamp is able to hit him with a spin kick. He tries another, but that gets caught, and he's back suplexed by the Doc. Steve Williams suddenly seems to snap, and he starts punching Vampiro in the face time and time again. The ref keeps trying to stop him, but Dr. Death has snapped, and he'd knocked the ref down. The match is thrown out for DQ when it was starting to become watchable, so it's a Ken Shamrock gimmick. Dr. Death starts smacking the crowd barrier and he's escorted away from the ring by some security geeks. It gets worse though, because the next 5 minutes is Ed Ferrara screaming "Let me out of this cage," and they don't seem to know where the key has gone. And just like that, we have to watch Oklahoma stamping on Vampiro, and I forgot Dr. Death was even out her in the first place. It's a D, it wasn't really great. I like Dr. Death, but this environment is just way too chaotic for him to succeed. The match is a D, I was hoping for a little bit more. Shortly after that match, Steve Williams left WCW and went back to wrestle in Japan. Dr. Death Steve Williams passed away in 2009 at the age of 49 after losing a battle against throat cancer. I still feel like I barely saw what he was capable of. I'll have to check out his WCW time in the early 90s to find that out. But one thing's for sure, they clearly didn't think he could cut a promo, otherwise they wouldn't have had JR and Ed Ferrara do all his talking. All that's left to do is shove him a final grade for Ring of the Hawk Season 3. The run itself was bad. Everything he was associated with was bad, but he himself was not bad, in the ring and looks-wise at least. But we are only allowed to grade what we saw in front of us, that's the rules. And what I saw was a bunch of 2-minute matches from someone who was injured a lot, was pretty slow, and ultimately he failed. Jim Ross thought this guy could be a main eventer, but 1999 was way too late for him. This run gets a D because it wasn't boring, and that is the second worst thing on Ring of the Hawk after not having a finishing move. And if you don't agree with that, I've got nothing left to prove.